All right. Thank you, everybody, for making it to the end of the day. I know it's not always easy sticking it out till the end. So welcome to our panel today. We're going to be covering healthy buildings beyond four walls. And when we were doing research for this panel, it was really interesting to see how big of an industry healthy buildings has become. In fact, recent research has said that healthy buildings between now and the next 5 to 6 years is going to explode to $71.5 trillion. And I found this surprising, not so much with how big it is, but the fact that this industry is getting so big, despite the fact that healthy buildings is really behind the scenes. And what I mean by this is most people don't realize a building is healthy or unhealthy until it is not healthy. A perfect example is many of us walked into this room just before and we thought it was so humid and hot. Other examples can be with sound or lighting. The other day I was waiting at a medical appointment, and in the waiting room, the fluorescent lights were flickering. The fan was between the lighting and the patient waiting room, and it was flicking every single time that the fan passed. And I thought, how unhealthy, not only for us patients in the waiting room, but certainly for the staff who are sitting there. So it's really exciting that this is such a big industry and that we're part of this industry. But I really think that there's a lot of progress that we can make in terms of getting healthy buildings in the narrative front and center in front of our customers and our teams. And so today we pulled together a whole panel of specialists, whether they're from the manufacturing side, the consulting side. And what we're hoping to bring to you today is that you can leave this session and talk to your teams and talk to your customers about different trends that are on the horizon. We really want to equip you so that you bring it to the forefront, and you can talk about healthy buildings when things are going right and not just when they're going wrong. So to get us started, I'm going to have the panel introduce themselves, starting with you, Julie.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. I am Julie Petrone. I am responsible for the global marketing for ABB, for Building Automation and Controls line. So ABB acquired the Building Automation and Controls line about 5 years, coming up on 5 years ago, a company called Cylon out of Ireland, and I came with that acquisition. So have been involved in this space now for about 9 or 10 years.
Perfect. How about you, Mike?
All right. Thank you. Mike Davis. I am with Motorola Solutions. I came to Motorola by way of an acquisition also. So I was with a sensor company called IP Video. We developed a smart sensor and were acquired about a year and a half ago. I've got about 30 years in the low voltage technology industry, and most recently really focusing on this smart building market.
Thanks, Mike. Stephanie?
Hi, my name is Stephanie. I have my very own microphone.
She's really excited.
I'm very excited. I'm a principal engineer with SES Consulting. We're a mechanical and controls consulting firm. So I do, speccing the sensors and getting them installed and all of that stuff. So I'm a consulting engineer.
Perfect. And Tyler, do you want to round us out?
I have never been acquired.
I have been acquired.
Oh, man.
My name is Tyler Smith. I'm the VP of Global Lifecycle Solutions at Johnson Controls. And part of my team's remit is to lead the Healthy Buildings portfolio at JCI. And I was acquired in 2005 when I was an employee of York, who that year was acquired by Johnson Controls, and been with the business ever since.
Well, we'll keep that theme going because I was also acquired. This was actually not prepared at all. I started at a company that's on the show floor today called Distech Controls, and we got acquired back in 2015 by Acuity Brands, and I currently serve as their Vice President of Marketing and Sustainability for their intelligent spaces side. So some of you actually came up to me and were talking to me about Acuity. You're familiar with one of our two business segments, which is more of that lighting and lighting controls, and then our fastest growing business segment, which is the one that includes Distech Controls. You might have also heard of Key2 Therm refrigeration controls. We have Atrius, which is our cloud applications and platform. And then most recently, if you read earnings reports, you might have saw that we did a sizable acquisition with one of the disruptors in the audiovisual space and bringing in QSC as part of our overall offering. And all of us are up here talking about our respective companies, not necessarily to sell our respective brands, But I think it's really beautiful, and it's kind of thanks to panels like this, but also the theme of healthy buildings overall, in that all of us realize we can't do this alone. To really achieve healthy buildings, it's going to take all of us working together and trying to move this forward, especially at this time where we were having a conversation just before. This is still very much voluntary. So how do we make sure that the spaces in which we're operating and living are healthy? So 2020, just 5 years ago, we were actually, I think, in Orlando the last time. We all knew the world was about to change or possibly change. And all of a sudden in 2020, healthy buildings became really interesting. I don't know about you, but I was getting phone calls and emails from everybody, from my friends to like my grandmother, asking questions about indoor air quality and what my thoughts were. I am curious, though, Julie, from what you've seen, has interest waned over the past 5 years, or are folks still really curious as to what that can look like in the built space?
So I think in 2020, when we were experiencing COVID, there was extreme urgency in indoor air quality and having those clean spaces and healthy spaces. While maybe I wouldn't say that it's waned. I would say that now it's redirected to a more thoughtful, more focused process on the indoor air quality within a building. Meaning, if you're a facility manager or a building owner, you're going to take a look at the sustainability of the building, the health of the building, and what's going on with your occupants, with the health. So I don't think it's gone away. I just think it's a little more focused in what we're looking at now. And again, with I've always said, and this is just my humble opinion, sure, there was COVID, but there's also colds and flu and, Legionnaires, and there's a lot of things that come through filtration systems, HVAC systems, that can spread different germs, viruses, maybe nothing as extreme as COVID at this point, thank goodness. But again, I think when you take a look at indoor air quality, and I'll touch on this, I think, in a little bit, but you're still looking at the health of the occupant and the importance of the building and keeping that building leveled for the occupants that are now coming in and coming back to work. So that's my thought is it's a little more focused, a little more streamlined, but not, and maybe not as frantic. That we need to get that done, but it's still there and it's still top of mind for most people, I would believe.
And I'd love to dive a little bit deeper on that one about kind of this labor situation right now. It's one of the common themes. It might be easing up a little bit, is my interpretation from speaking with folks on the trade show floor this year, even versus last year. But we know overall for our industry, it continues to be a real challenge. How do healthy buildings play into all of that? And if we do have employers or company owners here, are there considerations that they can keep in mind for healthy spaces of helping drive or perhaps retain talent?
Sure. I think there's a myriad of things that are important to a building owner, a facility manager, and an occupant. One being, again, a healthy building statistics show, and I know you listed some statistics at the beginning here. When you have a healthy building, statistics now show that the indoor air quality, the lighting, and the overall experience of a employee or an occupant, you'll see better output in their work. So as you mentioned, the lights and the flicker, I would suspect those people were not working at their highest output. They probably were not. And I think that when you take a look at the importance of bringing people in, making sure that their comfort, the lighting, the healthy room, everything about what's put into that building keeps those occupants, their output, their workflow better, keeps them healthier, obviously, so there's not as many sick days. And I also believe when you take a look at, my age is showing when I say a little bit of the younger people that come in, they're looking for sustainable buildings and healthy buildings. And to get these people back into a building to work, it's really important that we make sure that we provide the experience and the comfort and the overall healthiness of the building to those people. So you get the return on investment, again, bringing new people in if you are constantly having changeover, that's expensive. Sick people, out a lot, that's expensive. Or again, with the output of what they're doing because the building is not at top quality, that becomes expensive for the building owner and again, a facility manager. So when you take all of this into account, I think it's really important that we take a look at how we're bringing these people back in and providing that good, healthy work environment, gets them back to work and gets them working at their best capabilities.
Thanks, Julie. And one housekeeping item that I forgot to mention at the top, if you guys have questions throughout, you're more than welcome. We do have a question period at the end as well. But if something is burning, feel free to shoot your hand up. And I mentioned at the top that we have such an interesting panel with unique backgrounds. Mike, when you and I first met, you were talking about a concept of healthy buildings that goes beyond maybe at least the traditional areas where I was thinking about, and you were talking about the actual concept of physical safety. Can you talk about that a little bit more and what your organization is looking at in the overall space if we think about healthy buildings maybe more holistically?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So my background being in the technology side from Motorola is probably a lot different from most of you here. But when we took a look at this market, what was interesting to us is there's a lot of data-driven outcomes. So we're looking at, when you guys are designing a system, data is critically important. When you're running a system, data can be critically important. We need to look at future optimization, efficiencies, what changes might come down the pipe. And so data then becomes king. And so we're more in that data collection world. And so we look at that quite often. With the advent of AI, and I know that's a popular term these days, but AI is definitely coming into the data analytics space. And so we are heavy into taking and collecting that data, using AI for analytics to do pattern recognition and exception reporting and so on. And there's a lot that we see today that data that people don't really realize they have. So of course we're all used to the temperature and humidity and particulate matters and VOC readings and so on. But you may not think about some of the other things that are perhaps already in your space. So things maybe like in the world that we occupy quite a bit, in the security space. Is a door open? Well, your security system knows if that door is open. Is there motion in a room? Well, there's probably a motion detector already there. Occupancy, I wish I had an occupancy sensor here or here, but there is already a security camera, and security cameras can do occupancy counting. And so there's a way for us just to kind of change our paradigm a little bit about what is data and where can I collect data from. All of these things that I work with from technology are, at the end of the day, they are sensors. A camera is just another sensor, right? And sensors, we can analyze that data. We all hear about facial recognition and license plates recognition and all of these things, and that information can be relevant to that building operation. So I think it's really important to kind of step back, look at the audio, video. We do a lot with audio analytics. We do a lot of pattern recognition with audio analytics. Imagine, starting to learn the behaviors and the audio that might be associated with this blower or this ventilation system or so on, and associating vibration sensors, motion sensors, thermal sensors. All of these things can now be ingested into a larger system. We can now start looking at what's normal, what's not normal, and start getting into more predictive analytics and thinking about maintenances and efficiencies at a level that we never thought before. So that's kind of my perspective and where we come from.
I'm going to apologize in advance. I'm throwing this live at you, but I'm curious. I've been chatting with a few people before the session. We're talking about budgets, and budgets are always an issue. I think in 2020, maybe to Julie's point, there was this frantic notion of we have to just throw money at the solution, maybe a little bit less so now. Are you seeing, Mike, that when you bring in the element of safety, or you extend a healthy building to include safety, that maybe folks are more willing to invest in that space? Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah, absolutely. And let me tack on to what Julie said already. In a building, you can work really hard to optimize the indoor air quality of that building so you have healthy occupants. But what we find is that a lot of companies are having trouble getting people back to the buildings. So we've got a lot of commercial industrial space that's not being utilized, and people are not wanting to come back to the office. And a lot of times, if they can use the excuse of, the air quality is not good, I don't feel healthy, if you have the ability to validate and say, it is. I'm real-time monitoring every room here, and I can actually see that. That's of high value today. So the ability to show, keep and monitor, look for exceptions, and be able to report and provide visualization tools of what that IAQ really is, that can be really helpful. Now, to add to what you said, of course, when I can take a single multi-purpose sensor and capture lots of data, some might be relevant to air quality, some might be relevant to safety, some might be relevant to security. I have multi-purpose that device. It's took me one cable run. I've got one source for all that data and analyzing all that data. There's a definitely an economy of scale to doing it that way.
Great, thank you. And Stephanie, I know that you, in your consulting work, often bridge the gap between a building that is maybe healthy and then a building that is more focused on the sustainability or the energy saving side. I know when budgets, again, are really tight, sometimes it feels like the two are at odds. Can you maybe share some examples of where you've seen those tensions, and then equally maybe where your clients have managed to overcome that divide?
Yeah, so I would just add one thing to Julie's point, or maybe one conflict. Because what I'm seeing post-COVID is that it's like, oh, we had a flush, nighttime flush. Let's just take it out. Oh, our CO2 levels, set points were lower. Okay, it's post-COVID. We can just return those to normal. And I have seen this huge disconnect in the industry between energy, so sustainability team, the operations team, and then the occupants. And I hear this story all the time. It's like, oh, I hate sustainability. They reduce my set points and then I'm cold, or like my CO2 levels are too high. And then of course there's the operators that are like, okay, well, sustainability is making my life harder because they're implementing all these control strategies that are too complex and they're doing these setbacks. And it really is at odds, which I find really interesting because I'm sure most of you have heard that like 3-30-300 rule, where, you spend for every $3 you spend on energy, you spend $30 on rent and $300 on talent, like wages. And so it's really interesting to me that for so long we have been efficiency, like doing efficiency in terms of energy at the expense of occupants, because if you think about it, occupants are 100 times more valuable than the actual sustainability. But I think probably the reason that's happened is because it's extremely hard to quantify. Like, oh, were you actually more productive today? That's a really hard thing to quantify. But if your energy bills look less, that's really easy to quantify. So we're starting to see this change, and partially it's because operators are fed up. They're like, I'm not implementing these sustainability projects. I'm not doing this unless, something is different. And so we have to address it differently. And I work a lot with clients where like, I literally am this go-between between sustainability and operations. And I'm like, hey, you shouldn't hate each other. Like, let's chat. When we do a sustainability project, like the outcome should be easier operability, happier occupants. And it's kind of cool as you see more decarbonization in the space, because heat pumps lend themselves really well to this. They don't like aggressive setbacks. They like to run like longer hours, which means it's actually more efficient to run it at the constant temperature all the time. So I think this decarbonization is helping to drive that a little bit. But I think also operators are getting a bit fed up, and sustainability is realizing they have to change a little bit. And then in terms of, people and labor shortages, we are finding that. Like as I hire new young engineers, I'm always surprised. I'm like, oh, it's so great. You can just like work from home, and if your kids need something, you can go. And they're like, well, I don't have kids. I want an office. I want an environment with people where I can like chat around a water cooler. Like they actually do want that. They want to be in the buildings. But if your building is old and it's always too hot and you have to open the windows and it's like a trek to get to, they're not going to want to be there. So we really have to, focus on this. And I think for so long it has been energy first, and then occupants put on a sweater. And it really needs to change because otherwise we're not going to get anywhere.
And I know another contrast we see sometimes is around the aesthetic of a building, is that sometimes a space might be designed. I think it's maybe one important element is we automatically as an industry think of a healthy building from temperature, humidity, CO2, but there's also the design space where you're thinking about the occupant more holistically, what that experience is like. And I think sometimes we design these beautiful spaces, but perhaps they are not done in fully thinking through that occupant experience. So what have you seen that with your clients, and then have there been workarounds? Are we maybe like in the sustainability space coming closer together, or does that still remain a bit of a challenge?
Oh my gosh, so many times. Like I work on so many, like this building is brand new and it's all wood and it's windows and it's stunning and it's 5 years old and it's LEED platinum, and like everybody hates it because it's always too cold or it's too hot or it's stuffy. And so I'm doing a project right now with a client, brand new building, big admin building in Vancouver. It's stunning. Like you would go in this building and you would assume everything is perfectly optimized. It's 5 years old, it's cutting edge, it's LEED platinum. But we were actually called in because everyone was too hot and everyone was too cold in the winter and it was stuffy, and like just people hated being in that building. So what we ended up doing is like this recommissioning to fix all of the comfort complaints. And in doing so, we reduced energy, but that was not the main focus. Like the focus was fix my building, stop my boilers from like failing and all of these parts from failing prematurely, recommission my building, make my occupants comfortable, and then also we saved energy, so then they got like some incentives through that. But we are seeing that a lot. And I think as LEED starts to have these commissioning requirements that people are opting into, that really helps, because a lot of these buildings, they're built and they're beautiful and they meet all these, passive house or LEED or whatever it is they meet, but there's no specific performance requirements, or there hadn't been with LEED. And so having that commissioning piece to actually tie like what your building is made of and what it looks like and how it works to how it's performing long term is really helping. And we are starting to see that, as well as, of course, like carbon emission limits. We're starting to see that, City of Vancouver just released it. City of Toronto is planning to. I know there's a few places in the States. Sorry, I'm from Canada. So those are my examples. But as that happens, now all of a sudden you can't just build a building and leave it alone and not care that it actually performs. Now you have to actually continuously meet your target. So that is really helping.
Thanks, Stephanie. And Tyler, I'm really excited to chat with you because you focus 100% of your time on healthy buildings, and I think that that's fantastic to be able to get that expertise. And we were chatting just before about indoor air quality and how 5 years ago everybody in this room became the coolest kid at the party because we could talk about indoor air quality. Well, I thought we were really cool. Has that remained top of the conversation in terms of occupants? Do you see that occupants, your average occupant, is still caring about indoor air quality? And maybe does that vary between different vertical markets?
Yeah, great question. I still feel like I'm pretty cool, by the way, five years on. I first want to acknowledge, I counted, I think there's 60 people in here, and we're competing with happy hours out there. So that 60 people expressed enough interest to come and be a part of this conversation. That's pretty awesome.
I love that you were just counting everyone.
Yeah. Well, I counted half and then I doubled it. So, yeah. So what are we hearing from occupants? And you're right that it does vary vertical to vertical or industry to industry. But I would say in general, we've got a lot of work to do with the occupant being an advocate for change, voting with their feet, voting with their wallets, choosing employers based off of the building that they're going to be able to work in, or whether or not they're going to be able to work hybrid, things like that. And I am excited about a day in which the average employee or nurse or doctor or parent or student or whatever is educated enough such that they can advocate for the type of building that they want to be in and not. But I still think we've got a long way to go there.
It's funny, just to add on that advocate thing, I'm working with a school district right now. So they have 42 buildings. And so we're implementing a bunch of it's mostly automation upgrades. And we have CO2 set points for all of their demand control ventilation. But in one of the schools, there's this one teacher who has a sensor in his classroom. And so we have to have the set points lower because otherwise he complains. And that's such a good example.
That never happens.
Because I know that when I was talking to people on the floor, they're like, oh, the CO2 levels are 1,000 ppms in there. And if you stay there too long, you definitely get a headache. So it's really exciting to see people advocating. It's the first time I've seen that. So
Yeah, we love it too. And I'll continue by saying, what is a healthy building? There's 60 people of you in here. There's 5 of us up here. We would get 65 different definitions to that. There was a while, 2-ish years, where healthy building equals good indoor air quality, because we cared about COVID, and that was what we were all advocating for, and the outcome that our customers were buying. I want to minimize the spread of SARS-CoV-2 in this building. But times have changed, things have evolved, COVID's behind us. Yes, we still have airborne infectious diseases running rampant. Do you care? I don't know. So I am encouraging myself and my team and others with whom I interact to think differently about what makes a building healthy, and acknowledge that's probably going to differ as you move from client to client, from industry to industry. Start with the outcome and work your way back. Is an energy efficient building healthy? Likely should be. Plenty of data out there to show that an energy efficient building, a high performing building, can be one in which energy consumption is minimized and health is optimized. Both are possible. We talked about the tension earlier, but there's plenty of examples of where it is possible. So I love talking about this. I'll pause for effect and let my panelists jump in, or if you've got a follow-on question, Lauren.
I do have a follow-up question, and it was perfectly timed, actually. I think gentleman from, is it Minnesota, from University of Minnesota? We're talking about healthy buildings and how it's still very much a guideline. And maybe in contrast to when we're talking about the sustainability space, where a lot of that is starting to come into regulation, for better or for worse, from a healthy building standpoint, is still very much voluntary. So what are your thoughts on that? Is there anything that we can do as an industry to maybe move that forward and help get that even playing field, or maybe even that common definition?
I would love to share my thoughts and then maybe pause for others, but the short answer is absolutely are things that we can be doing. So if voting with your feet as an occupant isn't enough, or there's not enough of that happening, if opting in as a building owner or operator or developer or whatever into a healthy building isn't happening enough, then how else can we advocate for change? How else can we ensure that the outcomes, financial, productivity, et cetera, outcomes of operating a healthier building are realized out there? Well, you can act. You can be a part of advocacy. You can lobby code bodies. It's a big piece of what my team and I do. And represent the industry, represent those that don't necessarily have the voice that you do. You're here because this is a topic that's interesting enough to you. Use that platform, use the knowledge that you're gaining to go advocate for change yourself. So we're excited about what's coming down the pike with the International Code Council. We're excited about what some of the more progressive governments are doing globally, the UK, Australia, the EU with the recast of the Energy Performance of Buildings Directive. We're excited about what the above code standards bodies are pushing forward in the industry. We've talked about the USGBC, we've got the International Well Building Institute with WELL, we've got Fitwell, we've got others. But there will be a day when all of these efforts culminate in the plans and specifications for that new build, for that substantial retrofit, referencing a code that requires all this stuff. And that's what I'm focused on. That's what I'm working my tail off for. And I encourage each of you, if this is something that's exciting to you and means something to you professionally and personally, to do the same.
And it would seem a little silly maybe to not dive into some of the technology, given we're at a trade show with an entire floor of technology. Julie, one of the pieces, and I forget who on the panel was just talking about it a little bit earlier, but one of the ideas of using maybe people counting as an opportunity to think about the design of a space, the use of a space, Can you speak to that a little bit more, and we'll dive into some of the other technology as well?
Sure. Again, it was already mentioned here that getting people back to work or the buildings. There's a lot of empty buildings right now, and one of the things, of course, is the goal to get people back to work. And I would agree with you, Stephanie. I think people want to get back to an office building where they can collaborate and be together and come up with some great ideas, versus how many Teams calls do we have all day long? I have a lot anyway, and it's so nice, a show like this, to see people in person. So the people counting bit, I think, is really not going to go away when you have the sensors or the thermostats, the smart stats, intelligent stats, call them what you will, that has the ability to count people in the room, and perhaps people are coming in at a different time, or how the room is set up, or how they're collaborating. I think it's very important to continually put these in these buildings, and I don't think that's going away. I think when you can count how many people are in this room, and again, we talk about VOC or the CO2, all the data that is pulled from all 60 of us. It looks like there's more than 60 to me.
Yeah, they heard it was going really well out there. So
I would say that the data, again, is so important, and it, to me, and probably to everybody in here, the data is where we all want the data. The data is what we all want to have. And with that data, with the people counting, is how you're going to redirect your energy in your building or your use of your building. And I just don't see, I see that as continued and continually being important.
I'll add to that people counting thing, because I've put a couple in buildings lately, and I love them because I've seen situations where it's like a big fitness area or something, and they are like, oh, we have occupancy in there. I'm like, oh, great. I notice it's not running on the occupancy schedule. It's just like, 9 to 5. And they're like, oh, well, yeah, because there's only one occupancy sensor and it's in the middle. And unless you stand like directly under it, it doesn't pick you up. So we kind of just overrode it. And that happens, in a big space. Like occupancy sensors that cover the whole area are tricky. Yeah. So in big theaters, for example, we'll do people counters. And yes, I have had some like tricky calibration things with those where they're reading negative, but it is awesome because, especially this has 4 doors, so it's not as nice. But if there's like 2 doors, it's, 2, one on each side, and you can really accurately estimate that, because now this fitness center that's used, 5 hours a day, maybe like every 3 days a week, is running 24/7. They spent all this money putting in the occupancy sensor. Excuse me. And I see this all the time. Like occupancy sensors are great, but they aren't just like put it in and go away. Like it has to be done by someone who knows what they're doing. And when the contractor, like I have this all the time where the contractor is like, oh, I actually think this is better. And I'm like, yes, let's talk about it. Let's figure out what the best solution is, because these sensors are amazing, but unless they're installed properly and like used, they don't do anything. And I see that all the time. These sensors, especially occupancy, are just disabled. Yeah. So I love people counters for that.
If I could add to that just a little bit. So in our world, there's a difference between an occupancy sensor and a line crossing sensor. So I'm going to put line crossing sensors at doors. I can have those line crossing sensors give me net numbers per door, and then I can have software aggregate that to a net number within a building, within an area of the building, et cetera. So, and then occupancy sensors are notoriously poor range. So, occupancy sensors are going to be great for conference rooms or maybe restrooms or, areas where you might not want cameras. Typically, cameras are going to be a better option for counting in larger rooms. You'd have to look around at the right kind of software, but the algorithms there are going to work a little bit better. So just 2 cents on the technology side.
I agree with that. We actually used, at our own offices, we're doubling our production area, and we're also expanding some of our office area. We used our own thermal sensors to see what spaces were being used, and in the end, what we're doing is we're doubling our production, but for right now, first phase for our offices, we're not outfitting it, so it'll just be empty to begin with, because we saw using thermal sensors that certain spaces, even though people were saying like, yeah, I'm coming in 3-4 days a week, we're coming in maybe once or twice. And then I think, Mike, also I wanted to dive into the fact that we talked about a couple of different sources for people in this audience. Well is one, and it's a little bit of a tricky area. Are there any resources, and I would start with you, but anybody on the panel, are there any resources for the audience if they are excited about this topic and they want to go learn more? Where would you turn them towards?
Yeah. So as a Motorolan, I would say there's a lot of data about IoT sensors on our site, but there's hundreds of sites about that. IoT is the most generic term ever, Internet of Things. But typically today, when people say IoT, they mean some sort of sensor that is network-based and can communicate back to some other network-based software. So I would just look for what's out there in that world, that both on the sensor side and the software and the analytics side.
Any other resources from the panel?
I'll add that I think that the most important outcome of consulting resources is to arm yourself with data and things that you can act on and then turn into a business opportunity for you, important outcome for your clients. And I get really excited when I'm a dork, so when I read like research papers and X paper says that this energy savings outcome is possible through a healthier building, or this test score improvement is possible through a healthier building. So there's lots of resources out there like that. Lauren, you mentioned the International Well Building Institute and the ample amount of data that they've got on their site. Investing in Health Pays Back is the most recent campaign that they did around that, if you like the data side of things. Our team has also written some white papers, authored some studies if you want to Google us. But there's all kinds out there. I think to zero in your search, though, think about how could you use that data to then drive this movement forward, and then work your way back on what is the type of statistic or paper or case study or whatever that you need to arm yourself for that outcome.
Brad, you have a question?
Yeah, just I want to pick up on that, Tyler. Like, let's say I'm a building owner.
Hang on, I'll maybe just get you the mic one.
Oh, here. I'll steal this one. It's okay. Got a mic. And earlier you rhymed off a whole bunch of different certifications. I think Fitwell and LEED and Well Building.
Yeah.
So if I'm a building owner, or if I'm a consultant advising a building owner, as I actually am, how do you decide which one of those you should be pursuing, or what are the criteria you should be thinking of in terms of how you evaluate and make a decision about which direction you might want to pursue?
I'll get that started, and then I'll let others jump in. Those that I rattled off, I call, others call as well, above code standards. So you've got code requires you to do something, and then you've got these standards that operate above code that provide you a vehicle, a mechanism to achieve better outcomes, a healthier building, a more decarbonized building, et cetera. So there is no, I'm going to dodge this question masterfully. There is no one answer to that. It just depends on what's important to you, what's important to your constituents. Who do you have in that building? Who are you trying to attract and retain in that building? What matters to them? And then work your way backwards to what standard do I need to reference in order to achieve that outcome for my building.
So would you say the different standards achieve different things?
Well, yes.
In terms of a healthy building outcome, they're not all equivalent.
Yeah, his question is, all these above code standards, do they achieve different things? Short answer is yes. You've got, IWBI and their well standard. You've got Fitwell. You've got the USGBC, who's always 20-ish, 25-ish or so years been hanging out, and recently gotten into the IAQ game a little bit more heavily. So yes, I think that they are different enough that it's worth doing your research, armed with the outcomes that you want to achieve, to then choose the above code standard that you want for your building. Can you have more than one? Absolutely. It's going to cost you some money.
And another tool, oh, there's a question. Yeah, go ahead. Oh, hang on, let us get you a mic. Take this one.
My question is related to codes and standards. I think that the ASHRAE, we're at the ASHRAE conference, the 90.1 is an excellent tool, and that goes a long way in creating code. Have any of you dealt with and explored the 9 foundations of the healthy buildings that is published by the Harvard School of Law, the Chan Harvard School of Public Health, not law? Have you embraced that or had any background with that program?
Yes. And I'll happily pause and let others jump in, but short answer is yes. And he's referencing a book written by a dude named Joe Allen. He's like the rock star of our industry. If Healthy Buildings had a rock star, it would be Joe Allen. And so thank you for bringing that up. If you haven't heard of Joe or the work that he's done at Harvard, if you haven't read his book and this kind of stuff is exciting to you, then I recommend buying a copy of it on Amazon. It's $15. And in it, he dives super deep into the subject, provides his own definition of what a healthy building is and isn't, provides a ton of data-driven justification for operating a healthy building. He sets a definition that I really like, by the way. Remember I said there would be 65 different definitions in here? If we all rallied around Joe's, I think we'd be in a pretty good spot.
What is his definition?
There are 9 foundations, and I'm not going to be able to name them all off. I'm sorry.
That's okay.
Air, water, light, sound, thermal comfort, IAQ, 5 or 6 of them.
If you stick around at the end, we'll talk about it.
Yeah.
You know what I think would be, I'm sorry, I'm stealing this, would be a really good place to start is because, like I said, there's this sustainability operations thing where they, like, actually some of my clients, they hate each other. Like, it's a huge thing. And, you know, we just did a building where they had a heat pump and it wasn't performing, and we redid the heat pump and we saved, 200,000 kilowatt hours a year. But the most exciting thing to the client was, I have had the least number of comfort complaints I have ever had in this building. And that is what the outcome of any upgrade, decarbonization, energy efficiency, like that should be a key outcome. And I think the way to do that is to work not just with the sustainability team, but also the operators, because yes, they don't have all 9, but what they care about is how many complaints am I getting? And so whether those complaints are air quality or temperature, if you can work to have an outcome that addresses those and push for that as being like one of the win criteria of the projects, I think that's a really good place to start. And then you can have, all the other 9 after that.
Yeah, I think that's really important. I think it's really important what you just said, because there's these certain outcomes that people within the building are interested in and want to have, and it's I don't know. I like what you just said. I'm sorry. That's about it. I agree with you.
And there's a question at the front as well. Can we steal the mic? It's up here. Thank you so much.
It's more of a comment than a question. So coming from an HVAC background, born and raised in the industry, and my husband and I owning a company, and we have been directly affected by ample toxic, commercial buildings and residential homes. It's something that we're super, super, super passionate about now, to the point that it completely changed our lives and the trajectory, moving forward. So Stephanie has hit the nail on the head multiple times, and that I encourage everyone, no matter what sector you're in, if it's corporate or small scale, small business, is to have these conversations with your tradespeople, with your contractors. Coming from Tulane University in New Orleans, the Lavin Burnick Center is LEED certified, but we're not even utilizing those strategies because the operations team doesn't know how to operate them. So again, if it's great that we can have a whole team whose focus is on sustainability and certification of the building, but if they don't incorporate the actual people who are on the ground, hands-on, using this technology, if they don't train them or ask them questions or just involve them in the process, then it's a fail. It is a complete and utter fail, no matter what sticker is on the outside of that building. So again, to have these conversations with the people who are actually utilizing and implementing these things. And to Tyler's point about code, we're also seeing there's a difference between code and enforcement of the code. And again, it's a conversation. I tell my husband all the time, because he will have arguments with code enforcement officials when they're telling him, because the document is not 20 pages long, it's the incorrect document. All they're focused on is the 20-page length. I tell him, approach them in a manner that says, let's learn together. I want healthier buildings and you want a healthier community. Let's partner together and have a conversation where we can learn how to do this together. So that's just, I think, critical in implementing these things, is to have the conversations. And my favorite is Dr. Joseph Seabrick, who I think is the rock star of building science and healthy buildings. And he would say, let's KISS and stop doing stupid things.
Thank you so much for
Amen.
sharing that. And I think you're absolutely right, and it hits the nail on the head in terms of you need that multi-stakeholder engagement. And again, we are perhaps coming from competing organizations up here, but we all agree that we need to work together in order to achieve it.
Well, and education and training, and you said it with training, and we talk about training and the lack of, and how we're struggling with that in this HVAC industry, but educating people from the building owner to the facility manager to the installer to whomever it is, that's an arduous task. It's what needs to happen, but it's just starting at the ground level and training and educating, and it's so important. And it's so important not only in what we're discussing today, but in this industry altogether, getting people trained and understanding the technology and what you can do with it and how it works. Yeah.
Stephanie.
Sorry, I have one other thing to add, because I imagine a lot of you in here are like product suppliers. Who has products? Like who is okay, not that many then. So lots of contractors then? Okay, what are the rest of y'all? Okay. Consultants. Okay, well, one of the other things I was going to say is oftentimes what I see, and not always, sometimes building owners and like the sustainability team and the operations team play nicely. Like I have seen it, it does exist. But oftentimes they don't, and so it's actually up to the person coming in, either with the technology or as a consultant, to actually get them to talk, because I've definitely seen, the building owners or the energy managers kind of just bypass the operations team, and it's, I guess, not always, but you can't just assume that they're going to do that engagement. So sometimes, even if you're like, I'm supplying this sensor and this is not within my scope, like suggesting that can really help.
I'll add to that, in that, we find that different vertical markets definitely have different perspectives here. So especially, we've been fortunate in working with a lot of K-12 and higher education, and these people have come to us with a defined need and funding for that need. So that's made a big difference, rather than us kind of going out and having conversations and trying to get these groups to talk to each other, who naturally don't want to talk to each other. So I think as we see more and more of that happen, maybe it's going to take place first in the public spaces, but that will push down into other areas. And we've had such huge successes in that K-12 higher ed space that we're able to start referencing that, using those use cases, leveraging the success stories that we're getting there into some other places. So just a comment to add on there.
I appreciate that you touched on the topic of funding. I think it's really important that we talk about as a group the idea of incentives and government incentives. We know, as we're talking about at the top, that 5 years ago we were throwing money at the situation. Are there still government incentives available for everyone in this room, whether they're coming from the consulting angle or more from the manufacturing? Like what are the options that are available to people in this room?
Can I just want to say that one of the topics that we had talked about in the United States with the current election, where you had the Biden-IRA Act here in the United States, and there was lots of money put into sustainability and this specific topic. Day one, I think, of the presidency, that the money was redirected and the money was changed. And we were really, again, with my company, trying to teach the system integrator to help support schools as well. We had, the list of schools and how much funding they had. They didn't understand how to get the money.
Right.
They knew they had the money, but they didn't know where, then how to get it, how to use it, the steps. And so we were, again, back to the education and the training, providing links of here's how you can get the funding. But it changed, it just continually changed. And then now with the redirection of the money, I'm not sure how the funds, to be honest, because I was doing a trade show, I wasn't paying much attention to now what are people doing. So maybe one of you educated folks to my left can answer that.
Yeah, Scott actually has offered to answer
perfect.
this. So.
Yeah.
I know utility providers offer energy rebates for demand control ventilation, economizers, CO2 sensors, so you can kind of use that to help with the healthy building, and you can use, utility providers offer still rebates with economizers, CO2 sensors, demand control, and the implementation of those adds typically fresh air where we need it in the buildings at the right time, which is an improvement in the healthy building strategy. But you're getting it through an energy rebate, just a FYI. So
I love that. Go ahead.
I don't know them, but tomorrow at our session at 9, we have Abby, who specializes in incentives, and she is going to spend some time talking specifically about what the incentives look like with the new administration, what they looked like last time this happened, and where to access other incentives. So if you come at 9 tomorrow, you can learn all about that.
Great plug.
I'll add to that too. So there are still some EPA grants that we've worked with some customers on, and a lot of times state grants. So right now, New York, especially New York City, is offering some things. Chicago is offering some things. We think LA may offer some things here shortly. So if you're not seeing something federally, there could still be something state.
So also the Energy Star, I recently finished a master's degree program, and that was my capstone. It was how to utilize Energy Star and the net zero energy ready programs to lead to healthy buildings. So again, to Tyler's point, code should be just a minimum basic standard. If we're utilizing Energy Star and those higher options, it pushes us above standard code, and there are financial incentives to do that, and it brings us to a result of a healthy building. Again, this is something I'm super passionate about, where if we change the narrative and maybe we shift some verbiage away from climate friendly and all this kind of stuff, and it became more of a human health awareness topic. It doesn't matter what administration is in staff, like we all care about better human health. So, but you can use the Net Zero Energy Ready program, and I think you're going to get the biggest bang for your buck there. And those programs do still, and it doesn't have to be zero energy, it's just ready. It doesn't have to be like fully.
Right.
I love that. I love your passion, by the way. And this, it brings us back to this, what is a healthy building definition that we've been toying with here. A healthy building is not COVID related. A healthy building is not good indoor air quality. A healthy building is one in which people thrive. And when you expand the definition, not only can you get creative with access to funding, but, and we touched on this earlier, you can also get creative with access to budgets. And Mike stepped us through this, using security data, camera data, et cetera. Boy, that's a whole different budget when you're talking about security and cybersecurity, and there's all kinds of things. So let's challenge ourselves to view this not as like an HVAC, COVID-related HVAC challenge. It's so much bigger. And that's really how we're going to unlock that money, whether it's government funding or internal budgets.
I actually want to stay on you, Tyler. We were talking a little bit before about this contrast of maybe budgetary considerations and even conflicting, I guess, needs when it comes to the sustainability side as well as the healthy side. Have you seen that, because you've been so deep in the space, kind of an opportunity to reach across the aisle within a building, not politically, but within a building to help bridge that gap?
Yeah, and we've touched on it a bunch throughout, including with Stephanie here, but I'll add maybe 1 or 2 points that short answer is yes, we see that. I can either have a healthy building or I can have a decarbonized building, but I can't have both, because all of these things that I want to do to this building to make it healthy carry some type of energy penalty. I'm going to clean the air better. I'm going to bring in more fresh air from the outside. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. My position, slightly controversial, maybe you agree with me, is that that's built on a fallacy. It's built on a fallacy that every building is operating optimally to begin with. So think about that. I'm thinking, man, I can't do all these things because it's going to make my building less efficient. I'm here to tell you that your building's already not efficient because you're not doing everything you need to do, and it's time to do some retro commissioning, and let's fold in a healthy building conversation as part of that process.
Stephanie?
I'll add to that, and I didn't come up with this. Actually, I stole it from someone's session earlier this morning, but I loved it. And they were just saying that energy efficient doesn't mean less energy. It means energy appropriately used. So it doesn't mean less fresh air. It means fresh air when you need it, where you need it. And so, I'm working with a client right now where we were going to do a measure where we were going to reduce the amount, like the fan speed in the air handling units. But actually, they're having this issue with pressure. And so we need to increase it in order to have properly pressurized buildings so the doors aren't having issues and people aren't uncomfortable. And that's actually going to add energy. And yes, technically, you could argue that that's less efficient, but I think of it as like, okay, this is needed, so it's not less efficient. This is a good use of energy. Efficiency is like, turn things off when they're not needed, not turn things off, just hard stop. So I think that's the way to look at it. And I also just really like the idea of changing the way we word things, because I think, as governments change, as clients change, goals change. And I do this all the time. I have clients that are like, okay, the key is GHG reduction. Great, that's what we're going to talk about. And this one's like, I actually don't care at all. I would like to reduce less money or whatever my goal is. And so just changing the way you talk about it to include that and reframe it, because they really should all go together. They should not be at odds.
Thanks, Stephanie. All right, are there any last questions? We're actually coming up right at time. No, well, thank you to all of our panelists. I really hope that we achieved our objective of equipping you to talk to your clients, to talk to your teams about a healthy building when things are going right, and not just waiting until those moments where things are going wrong. You can find all of us on automatedbuildings.com. We also have all of our contact details listed there, so you can come see us right now. But if you'd like to get more information, we'd certainly direct you towards that page as well. So thank you.
Thank you.